Shrouded in mystery and rumored to possess unimaginable power, this ancient Egyptian artifact is so potent, it's been deemed too dangerous for public display. Prepare to delve into the forbidden history of this extraordinary relic and uncover the reasons behind its banishment from the world's most prestigious museums.
We have the Cursed Workers' Tomb of Giza. A 4,500-year-old tomb has just been reopened near the Great Pyramid of Giza. The mass burial site in the Tribal Mountains was closed for nearly 30 years in order to protect it from thieves. The Giza Plateau tomb is thought to be cursed and contains the remains of high-profile workers. These basically weren't slaves, they were high-profile and included the ancient royal palace supervisor Nefertiti. He is buried there with his 2 wives and his 18 children. He was busy. The tomb contains 2 fake doors, so clearly people weren't supposed to get in. Inscribed on the wall was the following curse warning: all people who enter this tomb who will make evil against this tomb and destroy it, may the crocodile be against them in the water and the snakes against them on the land. May the hippopotamus be against them in the water and the scorpions against them on the land. The tomb was reopened for the public recently in order to boost tourism in the area, but with that kind of warning, I'm not sure if I fancy a visit. Coming in at number 9, we have the Curse of Akhenaten. Curses aren't supposed to be funny, I get that, but I can't help but thinking that the Egyptians went a little overboard when inscribing the curse in the son of Hapo, Amenhotep's tomb. Let's have a little read, shall we? He who enters this tomb will lose their earthly possessions and honors, be incinerated in a furnace in excretion rites, capsize and drown at sea, have no successors, receive no tomb or funerary offerings of their own, and their bodies would decay because they will starve without sustenance, and their bones will perish. Cool! Basically, all of the bases are pretty much covered then. While his tomb was broken into, his sarcophagus hasn't actually been opened yet, as it has a very well preserved face mask. Probably best to keep it that way. Coming in at number 8, we have the Black Tomb of Osiris. Am I here for an eerie black tomb? No, I'm not. Am I here for an eerie black tomb belonging to the Egyptian god of the dead? Again, really, I'm gonna have to pass on opening that one up. In 2015, a 25th dynasty structure was unearthed near Luxor on the west bank of the River Nile. So Osiris was a mythological god of the dead, but it seems that the Egyptians made a tomb for him anyway. All ancient Egyptian burial chambers were associated with Osiris, as pharaohs and rich Egyptians wanted to be able to share the afterlife with him. If Osiris decorates normal tombs, who decorates his? Demons holding knives. That's who. Can't be good. The tomb was opened in 2015, a year still fraught with violent protests in the country. I don't know about you, but I think it could have been a bad idea to open the god of the dead's tomb. Just a hunch. Coming in at number 7, we have Tombs with the Donkey Curse. You may not have learned this particularly gnarly piece of information at school when you were studying the ancient Egyptians, but a lot of 21st dynasty curses used to protect their wills, property and tombs in Egypt, and they were subject to a curse from the god Seth. Now, Seth was a god of storms, violence and deserts. He also happened to be a donkey. Anyway, curses involving Seth specifically said that he would rape those who entered the tombs. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to mess with a curse that promised a donkey would, well, you know. A donkey curse was famously found in the tomb of Der el-Bari Graffito, but we don't know if it actually, you know, never came to fruition, because who would admit to that? Coming into number 6, we have Mummy Soup. Very recently, in July 2018, a mystery tomb was opened in the Alexandria region. In it, archaeologists found a black granite sarcophagus dating back 2,000 years. As they began to lift the lid, a pungent smell stopped them in their tracks. Later, with masks and the Egyptian army in tow, the lid was lifted to reveal decomposed bodies. The family inside were buried, but their mummified remains had been exposed to the elements, and they were found as just bones in a pool of water. Water which presumably their bodies had dissolved in over time. Ugh. So far so good on the curse front, but these things seem to take a little time to manifest. Nonetheless, for me, the decomposed body water would have been enough to fill my nightmares forever. Did the mummy of Amun-Ra cause the Titanic to sink?
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the downfall. To start this list off, let's talk about one of the things that happened just before the transition into the first intermediate period of ancient Egypt. It is important to note some of the causes of the fall of the Old Kingdom, which is what brought forth this period of chaos chaos and turmoil. One reason that is often cited is the extremely long reign of Pepe II, who was the last pharaoh of the 6th dynasty. His reign began while he was a child, and it is believed that he lived to possibly into his 90s, which, like, first of all, that's incredible. Imagine that guy with modern medicine and plumbing. I'm just saying. But, of course, while that's wild to see that long of a reign, especially back in those times, his lengthy life proved to cause some issues for succession because the guy outlived all of his heirs. Because of this sort of disorganization, it led to the regime of the Old Kingdom kind of being disintegrated. In our number 9 spot today we have the Nile. The overflowing of the Nile was a very important time for ancient Egyptians. It is a super important cycle for them that was actually celebrated annually for 2 weeks. In the intermediate period, it is thought that the overflowing of the Nile, which really was necessary to their way of life, was lessened, or it may have potentially been non-existent for a period due to a drier climate, which is said to have potentially led ancient Egypt and its citizens into a terrible famine. The drier climate and the lack of the Nile inundation would have resulted in lower crop yields, which would have a significant impact on those living in the area at the time. In our number 8 spot today we have disorganization. Like I kind of mentioned in the first point, part of the reason this intermediate period is often referred to as the Dark Ages is due to the lack of organization within the kingdom. Manetho, who is a historian and priest from the Ptolemaic era, would describe 70 kings who ruled in 70 days. This is likely a bit sarcastic and an exaggeration, but it's meant to show how chaotic things were at the time in terms of leadership. This period of time can sometimes be overlooked in terms of leadership because there is very little known about who was actually leading during this time. It is possible that the 7th dynasty may have been more of an oligarchy, which would have likely been composed of officials of the 6th dynasty. There unfortunately is very little in terms of both textual as well as architectural evidence that survived this period, so much of what really went on remains a secret. In our number 7 spot today we have artifacts. During the time of the 7th and 8th dynasty, while it is true that we have little to go on, there have been a few interesting artifacts found that are believed to belong to this time period. There have been scarabs that have been found that are believed to have belonged to Neferker II of the 7th dynasty. There was also a green jasper cylinder that is believed to have come from the 8th dynasty. There was even a small pyramid that was constructed by King Ebi of the 8th dynasty that has been identified at Saqqara. While we have found these things, there are some rulers from this time whose positions remain unknown to this day. It is entirely possible that we may never know where some of these rulers lie. In our number 6 spot today we have literature. While this entire period of time is incredibly interesting, one super cool thing is that the emergence of what is considered literature by our more modern standards seems to have occurred during this period of time. This led to the birth of new literary prowess in the Middle Kingdom, the age that came after this period. There is one specific piece that is very important historically, and that is the Ipuwer Papyrus. Although this piece of literature is not dated to this period, it is widely believed that it is likely referring to this intermediate period, and it records the decline in both international relations as well as just the general impoverishment that was seen in ancient Egypt at the time.
Kicking off the list at number 10. EA6736. Ancient Egyptians worshipped lots of animals. At one point or another you've heard about how cats were highly respected back then, but they also worshipped other animals as well. It's not just cats, okay? So if you're sitting there looking at Mr. Freckles or whatever, don't give him too much praise, okay? There's other worshipped animals to talk about, like baboons. Believe it or not, baboons. They were pretty important pieces to this ancient puzzle. Egyptians had tattoos of baboons, but the most famous piece of history that we have preserved is in the collections of the British Museum in London. There's a mummy on display and it looks a little different than the rest. EA6736 was recovered from the Temple of Khans in Luxor, Egypt. This little man here dates back to the New Kingdom period, so anywhere around 1550 BC to 10 BC. So yeah, he's a little old. He looks great for his age though, I mean really. Baboons would appear all over art and religion in ancient Egypt. One of my favorite facts ever has to be that in ancient Egypt, pharaohs would train baboons to make arrests. Yeah, imagine stealing a pear for your family and then 4 baboons start chasing you, doing parkour, jumping over houses. It's crazy. Baboons are so smart. No wonder they worship them, honestly. Number 9. Enkisenamun. This queen was ruling during the 18th dynasty of Egypt. The pharaoh Akhenaten, this was his daughter. She followed in her father's footsteps and was a great ruler, but she was also the wife and half-brother of one King Tut. Her and King Tut had the same father, but their mothers were different. After King Tut's death, however, it's believed this queen may have married the pharaoh shortly after. And perhaps she's buried near him currently in the Valley of the Monkeys. That's why we can't find her. Back in 2010, DNA testing was being done in tomb KV21, where two 18th dynasty queens were recovered from that tomb in the Valley of the Kings, but not enough data was found from the mummies, but they do know the DNA is from the 18th dynasty royal bloodline, so we're getting closer. In another tomb though, KV63, numerous coffins were found. One had an imprint of a woman on it, along with jewelry, women's clothing, but the biggest clue really was pottery fragments. Of course. We've all played Assassin's Creed. The truth is in the scenery, my friends. The name Patan was on these pottery fragments, and the only person to ever use this name was the lost queen of Enkisenamun. So we're getting close, but let's maybe, stop destroying other graves in the process. Let's try and find a nicer way to do it. Let's keep hers a secret maybe. Number 8, King Ramses VIII. Number 8, the 8th. You know what I'm doing. The last son of Ramses III, King Ramses VIII. He's the 7th pharaoh of the 20th dynasty. King Ramses VIII. Okay, history is confusing with these numbers sometimes, I tell ya. I had to proofread that sentence a few times when scripting this one up. This lost king had the throne for a very short amount of time, and historians are trying to understand why. He was the only pharaoh of the 20th dynasty whose tomb is still out there, somewhere in the Valley of the Kings, just waiting. The thing is, with his ruling being so short, the theory out there is that the tomb of KV19 that belonged to the son of Ramses IX, many believe this tomb was originally built for Ramses VIII, but once he became king, everybody was like, maybe not this guy, Yeah, you're not that guy, pal. Apparently you're not that guy. Apparently you weren't that guy. There is a confirmed tomb that was never used for Ramses VIII as well, tomb QV43 in the Valley of the Queens. Made for him, but never used. The poor souls who had to build these, my gosh. Number 7, Luxor tomb. We've been saying 2,500 years ago a lot, and don't get me wrong, that's an awful long time ago with all this ancient history. But in 2014, archaeologists discovered a 4,000-year-old tomb from the 11th dynasty. Yeah, it was tucked away in Luxor, Egypt all this time. Spanish archaeologists found a tomb belonging to a leader from the 11th dynasty. It's pretty obvious this was somebody from the royal family or somebody who was a high-ranking official, because at the time, Luxor was the capital city of ancient Egypt. Officials believe this tomb could have been used as a mass grave due to the, large amount of human remains found inside. That's a pretty jarring clue. It's important to note that this tomb had also been used during the 17th dynasty because tools and utensils from later on in that time were also found in this tomb. We're gonna find a spork in 5,000 years and be like, yes, ancient tools for Gogurt. Number 6, the animal tombs. This tomb was found, as you may have guessed, in the Valley of the Kings, like all the great ones here. But this one doesn't sound like the rest. For starters, it's a number rather than a name. What in the Elon Musk is happening here? Whose name was a number? What? Tomb KV50 and KV51 and this one as well all form a group referred to as the animal tombs. Underneath 6 feet of debris, the entrance to these tombs were found. So when we enter a tomb normally that's been untouched, ideally for thousands of years, we can find anything. In fact, whatever they do find, it's a win, I guess. It helps complete this age-long puzzle. So when officials opened KV52 and it was completely empty, that doesn't feel too nice. That's not very warming. It was empty except for 2 boxes, both black and undecorated. The larger of the 2 contained the remains of a monkey, and the smaller one was a chest and it had 4 compartments. Yeah, hauntingly bare compared to what else we have on this list coming up.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Curse of Tutankhamun. As I see it, this one is either number 1 or number 10. This is probably the most famous mummy curse of all, so I could squeeze it into the number 1 spot, but also I want to keep this list a little bit unpredictable. This tomb was opened back in 1923, and on the wall of the tomb, it read, "Death shall come on swift wings to those who disturb the peace of the pharaoh." That is a pretty clear message. I don't know why no one picked up on the fact that something was going to go down if they opened up this tomb. But as we know, when it comes to colonizing, the people involved rarely pay attention to the negatives. The leader of this excavation died from blood poisoning, and 7 more people died prematurely. There's one thing that I will never do, and it is open up some old mummy tomb because I don't need that bad mojo in my life. I only want good vibes that get brought on from drinking ocean spray and riding a longboard. Coming in at number 9, we have the severed hand. If you're super rich and powerful, I think you reach a point where you just start collecting things because you have nothing else to conquer. Instead of finding some sort of inner peace and moving away from material life, you just consume endlessly, trying to fill the empty void inside you, but trust me, it doesn't work. Sir Bruce Ingram was a rich and powerful person person in England, and he had some friends who were digging up mummies in Egypt. One of his pals sent him over a mummy hand, and it was a gift, not something I would want to be sent. I'm more into practical gifts. I would be happier with a kettlebell. But something Ingram's friend should have told him was that there was a bracelet on the hand that said, "Curse be to he who moves my body." Yeah, I definitely prefer the kettlebell over a cursed mummy hand. Well, the curse came in full swing when Ingram's home caught on fire and then was hit by a flood. I guess in one way you could look at this as a blessing because water puts out fire, but his home was trashed. Coming in at number 8, we have the Curse of Senmut. Some curses haven't got the opportunity to activate. On the wall of Senmut's tomb it says, "His life shall not exist on Earth." That's a pretty clear threat and a curse I don't want to dabble with. However, this guy might get his shot soon. People are currently working on this tomb to make it a public attraction. I'm sure one person going through there will slip up and get cursed. Also, the translation says, "His life shall not exist on Earth," so I think ladies are free to visit. Coming in at number 7, we have Mummies on a Boat. Someone get Sam Jam on the phone. I have an idea for a movie. This story comes from 1699. Mummies must have been a huge hit back then. There was no TV, so digging up some old dusty bones with witchcraft attached to them would have been one of the most exciting things you could do. Well, in 1699, a book came out called Treatise of Embalming. There was apparently a true story in this book that talked about a man who was transporting 2 mummies he had just purchased via sailboat, and something very strange started happening. The ghost of the 2 men started to appear on the boat. These visions were terrifying and probably a warning that something worse was about to come. So this man did the intelligent thing and he threw the 2 mummies overboard. If he had kept them on board, they would have eaten him up faster than Joey Chestnut eats tube-shaped meat.
3, 2, 1, go! It's the 100th anniversary and we are underway.
Coming at number 6, we have the Curse of Hemuru. This is a nice sounding curse on the wall of some guy's tomb. It reads, "I shall seize his neck like that of a goose." So this dude isn't going to put a curse on you that will give you some sort of sickness that takes you out. He's going to personally come to you and choke you to death. Also, they had geese in ancient Egypt? Who knew? I thought the first goose was born when Wayne Gretzky scored his first goal.
Coming into number 10, we have the man with a burnt leg. The man with a burnt leg is basically the Egyptian boogeyman. He's a horror character created to scare naughty children and is often mentioned by parents to kids when they're acting up. The legend says that he takes children away to eat them and cook them, which is pretty stressful, although why the burned leg? Well, apparently his burns come from him misbehaving as a child himself. He was disobedient to his parents. This is basically all I got from the translation, but maybe he was captured by a previous boogeyman, but escaped only to continue the legacy. Coming into number 9, we have the Ghost of the White Desert. The Pharaohs Desert is regularly called the White Desert because of its large chalky rocks amid the sand. The desert is located between Dakhla and Bar Area and there's a popular spot for tourism. Those who have visited the desert often have more to report on than its beauty though. It is said that the ghost of a disgraced pharaoh lives there. That's right, Pharaoh Akhenaten wanders the desert as a lost soul. Sightings of the 1300 BC king have been reported by many people. It seems that Akhenaten tried to abolish beliefs in the many Egyptian gods, trying to encourage a wider scale focus on the god of sun. A lot of people were very unhappy with this, and it seems that on his death, statues and monuments were destroyed or hidden. Worse than that though, it seems that priests cursed him to walk an eternity of wandering the desert aimlessly. Coming into number 8, we have the Dashur military training base. The Dashur military training base is one of the largest military bases in the Middle East and is well known for being a grueling training ground for soldiers. While a lot of secrets are kept surrounding the facility, it is said that the ground is haunted by soldiers who have either died there or imprinted on the facility. Some soldiers have said that they've heard shouts or gunshots in the middle of the night. They've woken up prepared thinking it's some kind of military drill, only to find out that there's no one around. Some even say that they've seen the ghost of a dead army general doing push-ups. Coming into number 7, we have El Nadahar. El Nadahar is a beautiful woman who lures men to the river Nile to their deaths. She is some kind of genie or siren and is described as being light-skinned with long flowing light hair. She wears a long semi-transparent dress and calls to men in a soft but very audible voice. El Nadaha became popular as an urban legend in the 1950s when children would play by the banks of the river and young men would chat there later into the evenings. The genie has often been sighted by men in pairs, both claiming to have been placed in a trance but eventually managing to get away. Perhaps men on their own have been one of the many bodies washed up later on the banks of the river. Others say she doesn't simply drown men but devours them too. Local law in rural areas along the Nile say that once a man has spotted El Nadaha, he is doomed to die. Coming into number 6, we have the Djinn. The Djinn are elemental spirits that live in the Egyptian deserts. They can be anything from cheeky dust devils or the eyes of raging storms. They often appear as sandstorms, small tornadoes, or snakes, and their primary aim seems to be bringing misery and chaos to humans. The desert Djinn can control the elements and mess with landmarks so that people get lost when wandering through the barren land.
First up in our number 10 spot, we have construction technique. So I'm starting us off with one of the most widely known mysteries. How the heck were these things built? Although around 120 pyramids were built in ancient Egypt, there is a complete lack of records that explain how the pyramids were constructed. There are many theories, of course. Some believe the ancient Egyptians used a mixture of sleds and wet sand due to a painting in Khufu's tomb that shows men dragging a colossal statue on a sled while a person in front pours water onto the sand. Apparently, when the correct amount of water is used, it can increase the stiffness of the sand and reduce the friction between the object being dragged and the ground, making the object much easier to move. But even if that is exactly how they got the blocks to the site, how did they build the actual pyramid? Ramps are a common suggestion, but truth be told, it is just a theory and no one has been able to confirm once and for all exactly how they did it. That being said, the most entertaining theory, of course, is that aliens came down to Earth to help them, but until concrete evidence is found, the mystery endures. Moving on to number 9, the purpose of pyramids. While most historians can agree that the primary function of many of the pyramids was to serve as tombs for pharaohs, some researchers suggest that they may have had additional purposes. But what could these be? Well, some have theorized they were used as astronomical observatories or as power plants, while some even wonder if machines were somehow being used or created to harness natural energies. Of course, these theories remained completely speculative, but isn't it strange that after all this time, no one is able to say for certain the exact purpose of these colossal structures? Moving on to number 8. Queen Nefertiti. During the 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt, Nefertiti was the great royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, recognized for her great beauty and respected for her immense power. Now, her and her husband were known for their radical overhaul of state religious policy, in which they promoted the earliest known form of single deity religion centered on the sun disk. And with her husband, she reigned at what was arguably the wealthiest period of ancient Egyptian history. However, for all her fame and glory in the history books, one thing still remains unanswered: her fate after 1330 BC. You see, despite her influence, her presence completely disappears from historical records after a certain point. And to make matters more mysterious, her tomb has never been found. Some have theorized that her tomb is hidden inside the pyramids, but if that is the case, no one can figure out why it would be hidden in the first place. So to this day, whether her tomb lies inside the ancient pyramids remains a mystery. Moving on to number 7, pyramid alignment. There are a lot of inexplicable things surrounding the elusive pyramids. As we already covered, one of the mysteries involves how they were constructed, and of course the ongoing conspiracy of alien involvement. However, another inexplicable mystery is the precise alignment they fall in. So essentially, the pyramids of Giza are perfectly aligned with the cardinal points, north, south, east, and west, with incredible accuracy. In fact, the alignment is so precise that it's difficult to explain how the ancient Egyptians achieved such precise orientation without modern technology. So many Egyptologists have, of course, wondered, was this alignment achieved by chance, or does it indicate an advanced understanding of astronomy? Could this be another mystery pointing towards alien involvement? Who knows? I mean, historians are probably not jumping to that conclusion, to be fair. But many have used this to back up their own theories about the extraterrestrial hand in the pie. Coming in at number 6, precision. Sort of along the lines of the mystery of construction and alignment is the precise measurements and geometry of the pyramids. Looking back, it is fascinating and a little mysterious to observe, as advanced mathematical knowledge would have to been required to achieve the level of precision shown in the pyramids. In comes the aliens. Again, we can't get away from them. There are countless speculations that the ancient Egyptians acquired this advanced knowledge from an alien species. And I mean, of course, there's no way to confirm this. But whether you believe the alien theory or not, the fact of the matter is that where and how they acquired this knowledge is still up for debate. Coming in at number 5. Why did they stop? So not only do historians question how the pyramids were built, but the other million-dollar question is, why did they stop? So the last royal pyramid was built around 1500 BCE, and afterwards, while wealthy individuals were occasionally buried in or near pyramids, pharaohs were instead buried in the Valley of Kings near Thebes. But what exactly caused the rulers of Egypt to abandon their practice of pyramid burials? We aren't totally sure. One theory is that religious changes around 1500 BCE began emphasizing building tombs underground in the bedrock rather than in pyramids. Another theory points out that because tomb robbing was a major issue, that there were far less chance that burials would be looted if they weren't placed in such conspicuous settings. Another theory put forward by engineer Peter James came after he discovered that the extreme temperature fluctuations of the Egyptian desert were causing the limestone to expand and contract, which in turn meant that the stone blocks began moving to the edges of the pyramid, which would force them to detach or break, taking the outer casing with them. He theorizes this disintegration likely happened while pyramid building was still occurring, and after spending so much time, money, and energy creating perfect monuments, this visible and rapid destruction of the perfection could have been one reason pharaohs abandoned them as burial monuments altogether. But again, it's just all speculation. Moving on to number 4, far away from home. In 2013, archaeologists in Israel found something they'd never expected to find so far away from Egypt: a 4,000-year-old Egyptian sphinx. Specifically, they found the paws of the statue, and it's believed the rest of it was deliberately destroyed thousands of years ago. But here's the thing: nobody knows what an Egyptian statue was doing in Israel. The only clue left behind is an inscription on the base that bears the name King Menkaure, who was a pharaoh that ruled over Egypt around 2500 BC. Was it something that was handed over after a losing bet? We're not totally sure. It's highly unlikely that Tel Hazar, Israel was conquered by the Egyptians, because at the time Tel Hazar was a trading hub in Canaan directly between Egypt and Babylon. This meant it would have been vital for the economy that the two biggest powers in the area remained on good terms. So a gift? Maybe, though it's not clear why King Menkaure would have sent it or why anyone would have shattered it. All we really know is that for some reason there is a sphinx 1,000 kilometers away from the Great Sphinx of Giza. Moving on to number 3, mysterious cavities in the Pyramid of Khufu. In 2017, Scan Pyramids made a massive discovery inside the Pyramid of Khufu. With the aid of a non-invasive scanning technique that uses cosmic rays to produce 3D images, researchers discovered 2 previously unknown voids inside the pyramid, making them the first new spaces found inside the pyramid since the 19th century. But of the 2 voids, the larger one was particularly interesting. Not much is known about this larger chamber. It is apparently unknown unlikely to be a burial chamber, but historians theorize it could be a second grand gallery, or more intriguingly, hold some of the secrets to the engineering and construction behind the pyramids. But truth be told, they have no clue why it's there or what its purpose would have been during ancient Egypt, as the Egyptians deliberately built the hidden chamber to be completely inaccessible. There are no corridors or pathways connected to it, and the only way they could have put anything inside is if they filled the chamber while they were building the pyramid, then sealed it up afterward. Were they trying to hide something? We may never know. Coming in at number 2, the Pyramid of Djudefre. Son of the pharaoh Khufu, Djudefre was Khufu's successor and ruled during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom of Egypt. However, it is believed that Djudefre's reign was plagued by political and religious controversies, and that he wasn't Egypt's favorite ruler. Still, he, like his father, wanted his pyramid to have the highest point of any pyramid in Egypt. But there was one problem. He didn't have the resources to build the biggest pyramid. So, Djudefre used a little workaround to make sure the tip of his tomb was just a little bit taller than everybody else's, and built it on a hill. However, the mystery about this pyramid, compared to the others, is it's no longer standing. For some reason, while all the other pyramids of Egypt are still standing after thousands of years, Djudefre's pyramid has been totally destroyed, and all we are left with today is the base. Now, being a mystery and all, it's not entirely clear what's happened to it. Some think that Djudefre simply died before they were able to get much of the work done, and his pyramid was left in ruins. Another theory suggests that Romans quarried it for stones 2,000 years ago, and so it was simply torn down. And the most chaotic theory is that others think that the people of Egypt simply hated Djudefre so much that they were willing to pull apart an entire pyramid just out of spite. And last up in our number 1 spot, a mysterious queen. There are of course many tombs within the Great Pyramids of Egypt, and while they're all interesting in their own right, this one in particular is still puzzling historians and Egyptologists. In 2015, archaeologists stumbled upon the tomb of a woman who was buried among the Great Pyramids of the Old Kingdom of Egypt. In her tomb were inscriptions calling her both the wife and the mother of the king. Now, they were able to decipher a few things. This woman would have been alive 4,500 years ago and would have been one of the most important and powerful people on the planet at that time. So why have we never heard of her, and why can't we figure out who she was? Historians have dubbed her Kentekawes III under the assumption that she was the daughter of Queen Kentekawes II, and think she may have been the wife of the pharaoh Neferefre and the mother of the pharaoh Mekar. But again, they don't really know, they're just guessing. Whoever she was once an incredibly powerful woman, but today she is a little more than an enigma.
Coming into number 5, we have the City of the Dead. In Cairo, the truth is that 500,000 people are now living in a slum built on ancient cemetery, hence the name the City of the Dead. The El Afra graves date back to the 7th century, and a lot of the graves are small, elaborate buildings, which now some people have made their homes. These people are literally sleeping with ghosts. Aside from that, shanty houses have been put up amongst the graves, and kids play on the tombstones as if nothing's happening. Despite the new choice of city locations seeming like a good idea for space saving, a lot of residents have reported ghostly apparitions passing by, or the feeling of being watched while no one's around. Coming into number 4, we have Howard Carter's ghost. Famous Egyptologist Howard Carter, who discovered the tomb of King Tutankhamun, didn't die until 17 years after the notorious dig, but his ghost is said to haunt the Valley of the Kings. Howard Carter was born in the UK and lived in Norfolk until he became involved in Egyptology, aged just 17. British born but with Egypt in the heart, perhaps it makes sense that his ghost would haunt the spot he made the most important archaeological finding of the century, let alone his career. Now this leads me nicely onto our next point. We are, of course, talking about the Curse of the Pharaohs at number 3. This is an enduring urban legend in Egypt, while While in ancient Egypt, many superstitions were observed during burial processes and people believed in the god's wrath. In the early 1900s, in an age of enlightenment, a lot of people were not so fazed by legendary curses. Indeed, Western archaeologists and historians decided that they wanted to prise open the pyramids, which had been sealed for thousands of years. Big mistake. When King Tutankhamun's tomb was opened in 1922, the legendary curse of the Pharaohs was a main topic of conversation, with worldwide renewed belief in the legend. The team that excavated the tomb was quickly dogged by a number of untimely deaths. On the day Howard entered the tomb, a cobra got into his pet canary's cage with a dead bird in its mouth. Now, the cobra is the symbol of the Egyptian monarchy, and the symbolism wasn't lost on locals who began to panic. Lord Carnarvon, the financial backer of the excavation project, died shortly after the tomb was breached as a result of infected mosquito bite. The bite possibly matched a healed lesion found on King Tut's cheek during his autopsy. Two of Carnarvon's half-brothers also died shortly after the excavation. Basically, the whole thing was dogged with a lot of death and destruction. Keeping it in the Valley of the Kings at number 2, we have the fiery Chariot. A lot of people have reported seeing the ghost of an Egyptian pharaoh haunting the Valley of the Kings, and in some ways, I'm not surprised after all of the curse talk. Tourists and staff at the Valley of the Kings have reported seeing a flaming chariot manned by a figure wearing pharaoh-style clothing being pulled by black phantom horses. The most common sightings are at night, and many people hear horses or the sound of a thundering chariot. Finally, coming into number 1, we have Baron Empain's Palace. Baron Empain's palace is situated in Heliopolis, but is modelled in the Hindu temple style of India and Cambodia. The palace was built in the 19th century by a Belgian millionaire, Baron Empain, who fell in love with a beautiful young Egyptian girl. Building a mansion on the outskirts of Cairo, the Baron and his wife had children. Unfortunately, from the very beginning, they were met with misfortune in that house. Their daughter was insular and suffered from terrible moods. She was found dead in the house's basement shortly after her mother's untimely death. The Baron suffered from epilepsy and died in 1929, and his playboy son frittered away the rest of his money. The Egyptian government eventually came into possession of the house in 2005. It was open to the public for 2 months but closed without any explanation. Weird. Rumours that the palace is haunted have been rife for decades, and now the property sits abandoned. Because of its abandonment, these rumours have only increased. Locals say that the palace is a hotspot for satanic ritual, and is host not only to ghosts but also illicit orgies. Crikey. Alright, how random is this? But I checked my Instagram halfway through scripting this video, and one of my friends had uploaded a picture of Howard Carter's grave. He's buried in Putney Vale Cemetery, and it was really random to have been talking about him on this list, a curse kind of thing with Egyptology, and then there he was. Weird. Spooky.
Coming in at number 5, we have a cursed thief. Here's the thing. If you're gonna steal, you need to follow these tenets. Make sure you don't get caught. Make sure the item has high resale value, and make sure that the item you're stealing isn't cursed. If you follow those rules, you'll be a master thief before you know it. But this is one of the most famous stories in Don't Mess with Mummies. A German tourist decided he would visit an Egyptian tomb and steal something from a mummy. Little did he know you're not supposed to do that. The tourist eventually got extremely sick, became paralyzed, and then died from a mysterious cause. Now, what made this case so famous was when his stepson sent the cursed item back to Egypt. It arrived at the German embassy in Egypt with a note saying that the son felt in order to lift the curse from his family, he had to return the artifact to Egypt. Coming in at number 4, we have the Book of the Dead, a spell book from ancient Egypt that has been said to give the person who can control it the power to control the dead and walk amongst those from the afterlife. That sounds like quite the party trick. I don't know if that would be something I would mess around with in my day-to-day. I try to avoid death at all costs, so trying to decipher a cursed book of the dead sounds like it would give me the future I would not be looking for. And it should be no surprise that Aaron Amber, one of the men involved in excavating the Book of the Dead, died just a few years after it was dug up. Him and his wife were hosting a wondrous dinner party. They were probably bragging about this amazing book they found, and someone made an offhanded joke about ancient Egypt, and the next thing you know, Amber's house was on fire and he died there. So I don't know if you want to try and read that book, but I think I'll skip the opportunity for supernatural powers at the risk of death. Coming in at number 3, we have the curse consumes you. I don't know what it would be like to be cursed. I can imagine it wouldn't be fun. I think it's probably the feeling you have when you haven't done your homework and you know it's due tomorrow, but you still don't do it, and now you just have to sit there in your anxiety while you continue to not do it. If anyone has survived an ancient Egyptian curse, let me know in the comments. But for archaeologist Hugh Evelyn White, it would seem that the curse was able to work its way into his soul and take his life. White was found dead after he committed suicide by hanging himself. White was an archaeologist who disturbed quite a few mummies in his day, so if curses are real, it's safe to say that this dude had a curse or two attached to him. Now this is where the urban legend surrounding his death works its way in. Apparently there was a note left behind that said, "I have succumbed to the curse which forces me to disappear." The note might be made up to add some spice to the story, but if it's real, you can bet I will never dig again just in case I bump into any mummies. Coming in at number 2 is the Curse of Osiris. You think if you were digging up a tomb in ancient Egypt and you found a statue of the god of death, you would just turn around and go home. Like, not even back to base camp. You would just pack up all your things, fly all the way home, and start working as a used car salesman. Just a complete fresh start. Well, some people aren't as quick to abandon ship as me, and maybe they should be, because back in 1971 there was an excavation of a mummy's tomb in Saqqara. The head Egyptologist came across a statue of Osiris, and instead of going through with the little game plan I just laid out, he removed the statue of the god of death from the tomb and took it back to his office with his assistants. Once him and his assistant were settled in, he stepped into the bathroom to relieve himself, and that's when his assistant heard screaming coming from the bathroom. He rushed in to find the Egyptologist on the ground. He succumbed to some sort of paralysis and then died the next day. So a mystery paralysis that kills you in less than 24 hours could be explained by medical science or a spell from the god of death. Coming in at the number 1 spot, we have Titanic Mummy. We like to think that the Titanic sank because of human ignorance, and that's probably what happened. Saying that a boat was unsinkable in the early 20th century is one of the most insane claims you can make, but it's still fun to speculate on the supernatural. But this is how the story goes, and just so we're clear, the majority of this story is 100% true. There was a museum in England that was housing the mummy of the Princess of Anamera. It was a wonderful piece of history, but it was said to be cursed. Rumors of the curse being true seemed to solidify when a museum guard died out of nowhere. So the museum thought it would be a good idea to get this thing the hell out of there and then send it off to America. This priceless mummy from ancient Egypt worked its way onto the Titanic, and then we know what happened from there. Some people seem to think that it was the curse from this ancient mummy that brought down the unsinkable ship, and maybe they're right.
Number 5. KV-55. Okay, we covered KV-50, 52, they're all one tomb, but they're not, they're separate tombs. What's going on here? This one was discovered right next to King Tut's tomb, and the reason we call this tomb by a number rather than a name is because, well, we don't know who it was made for, really. The classic, what happened, you know? Even the walls of the tomb inside, they're empty. They aren't covered with any hieroglyphs, there's no artwork, there isn't any clothing laying around, no jewelry. It's quite odd, it's just simply bare. As you walk down the 20 steps towards KV-55, you'll notice only a few markings on the entrance. Markings that show that the entrance was once widened since it was first cut, along with its ceiling being raised slightly higher. So adjustments were made at some point. This wasn't a forgotten project by any means. The only hint as to who or what is buried here is remains on the walls. One hieroglyph was found in 1907. One hieroglyph, that's it. And it translates to, "The evil one shall not live again." Okay, so we should leave this alone, right? Yeah, you agree? Hit that thumbs up if you agree. I feel like we agree. Number 4. Akhenaten Curse. The walls of some of these tombs have warnings from the gods. One warning trespassers that the gods will wring their neck like that of a goose. That's a pretty good warning. I don't know. If I walked into somebody's property now and it said trespassers' necks will be wrung out like a goose, I'd turn around. You got me. You don't need a beware of dog sign. We're all set with that. You don't need to be an ancient god to get that message across. Just don't break into people's stuff. Don't steal stuff. Inside the found tomb of Akhenaten, a pharaoh official from 4,000 years ago, a curse was written on the walls. It was buried in Mastaba. It was an above ground massive tomb, and this warning was the first thing you saw. Might do against this, my tomb, the same shall be done to your property. It also warns of Akhenaten's knowledge of secret spells and magic, and it threatens to fill impure intruders with a fear of seeing ghosts. Again, there's that or beware of dog. You can pick which one you want to put in front of your building. What's more impactful for your property? You decide. Number 3, 2020 tombs. 2020, okay, while most of the world was stuck inside watching documentaries, more than 100 sealed coffins were found. And yes, this time they were occupied. Gross. Found, of course, in Saqqara, Egypt, Egyptian archaeologists have never been more excited, which is a weird thing to say after what I just said. Maybe we'll find the body of Cleopatra. Wouldn't that just be dandy, I guess? The fact that we found over 100 of these still in great shape is mind-blowing. It's actually pretty awesome. Grave robbers have been around since ancient Egyptian days, and for all these to be untouched for this long, that's good. This is great. I'm glad we found it instead of, pirates. The findings date back to 712 BC, which was a period where Egypt was controlled by foreign civilizations, like Persians or Greeks. The idea that we're finding mummies is great and all, but again, do we really need to open them up? Do we need to find Alexander the Great this badly? Like, what is he? It's gonna be bones. It's gonna be goop. Like, we're willing to disrespect this many souls in the process. It's kind of ironic. I don't know. Number 2, Black Tomb. We found a mysterious black granite tomb in Alexandria back in 2018. I remember this trending because I made several Brendan Fraser jokes on Twitter. Yeah, a lot of mummy talk happening that weekend. Things got real when the cousin of antiquities minister opened it up. Yeah, we just opened up a mysterious black granite tomb just because we're curious cats. When archaeologists found this massive untouched tomb, untouched for over 2,000 years, might I add. On one hand, that's a feat in itself, historical, great, discovery, awesome. But us humans, we have to just open it up and take a peek and just smell whatever's inside. Let's just do that, I guess. Maybe it's Alexander the Great, who knows? Egyptian news outlet El Watan reported that the tomb was lifted only a few centimeters before every official involved at the construction site fled the scene. They straight up ran away, it smelled that bad. Mustafa Waziri, Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, the guy put his entire head in the tomb to make sure that it's safe. I mean, or you could just do this with your hand. That works. Why your head? Like, just do one of these. I mean, I get it. The guy's OG. Nothing ended up happening, I think. I don't know. Number 1, King Tut. One of the greatest mysteries is, of course, the history of the young King Tut. Really young. Younger than you might think. The young boy became pharaoh at age 9 in 1332 BC. During his time ruling, the young king had to face a country in conflict. It wasn't exactly a chill time. At this point, Egypt and Nubia were going head to head over land, and not even 10 years into ruling, the young pharaoh died at age 18. It wasn't until 1922 until he was seen again. Howard Carter discovered the tomb of the lost king, appropriately, as you would have guessed, in the Valley of the Kings. This is where we could have been more careful, historically. When King Tut was discovered, they tried to move his body out of the oil that was coating the coffin after this long. But in doing so, they damaged him. They were too rough. They were too excited with this, old ass dude. So now it's next to impossible to tell what really took his life at such an early age. Yeah, we kind of blew it. We have some ideas though. It's not entirely hopeless. It's believed that King Tut had a broken leg. After some 3D scans were done, it appears the king may have not been in the best shape prior. He may have fallen off a chariot and then simply just cracked his leg, and that's how he died. So if Tut passed at an early age out of nowhere, who was that tomb he was buried in really meant for? Some suggest the tomb was built for the lost queen, Queen Nefertiti, but again, still trying to figure this one out because we haven't found her yet. The former antiquities minister doesn't believe this at all. He strongly stands by his belief that the lost queen was one of the female mummies found in the Valley of the Kings. Tut passed away at 19, so many believe his own burial chamber wasn't even done being built yet, so they just threw him in hers. How rude is that? History is pretty rude. I don't know. If I can sum up history, I'd say it's rude. Yeah, that's a fair word. We still haven't found her final resting place, but with the aid of technology and 3D scans, I have a feeling we're getting pretty close.
In our number 5 spot today, we have Noarks. Another problem that really contributed to the fall of the Old Kingdom and the introduction into this more difficult period of time was the rise in power of provincial nomarchs. A nomarch was a provincial governor in ancient Egypt. Since the country was divided into 42 different provinces, which were called nomes, there would be a government official that was responsible for each one. Nearing the beginning of the first intermediate period, the position of nomarch had become a hereditary one, which of course meant that one family was likely to hold the position and the power for quite some time. This of course meant that these families, with every year, would only get more powerful and more influential within their nome, which left them becoming more independent from their overall ruler. These nomarchs were beginning to have their own tombs built, and they began putting together their own armies, and of course, this went on to create conflict with those surrounding them. This not only created tensions, but it created warfare. In our number 4 spot today, we have division. Once things kind of settled from the chaos of the fall of the Old Kingdom and the bizarrities of the 7th and 8th dynasties, it was realized that Egypt was now kind of divided when it came to ruling, as there were two competing power bases. One of those bases was at Heracleopolis, which was located in Lower Egypt, and the other was at Thebes in Upper Egypt. Those in Lower Egypt had their rule for approximately 94 years, and their kings comprised the 9th and 10th dynasties, each with 19 rulers. The founder of the 9th dynasty, Akhenaten I, is often described as quite an evil and violent ruler who caused a lot of harm to those living in Egypt at the time. It is said that he was, quote, seized with madness, which I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it is likely hinting towards some sort of mental health issue. In the end, it is said that he met his demise at the hands of a crocodile, which, I mean, leaves me with a lot of questions. In our number 3 spot today, we have the buffer zone. Within the Heracleopolitan Kingdom, there was a powerful and wealthy province of Siut, or Asiut, which really rose to prominence during this otherwise difficult time. A new line of nomarchs began to rise out of this area, and they maintained quite a close relationship with the kings of Lower Egypt. We were able to discover this through what was inscribed on their tombs. These inscriptions provided a look into what the political situations were like during their reigns, and it describes this line of nomarchs as digging canals, reducing taxation, reaping rich harvests, raising cattle herds, and maintaining an army and fleet. Again, we are talking about a time that is referred to as the Dark Ages, so this sort of success was a big deal. Despite this thriving political situation, the Siut province acted as a sort of buffer zone between the dueling Upper and Lower Egypt, which means that it also bore a lot of the brunt of the attacks that were coming down to Lower Egypt from Thebes. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Upper Egypt rulers. We spoke briefly about those who were ruling Lower Egypt at the time, so what about Upper Egypt? Well, the Theban kings are said to have been descendants of Intef, who is the nomarch of Thebes, often referred to as the keeper of the door to the south. Intef is often credited with organizing Upper Egypt into the independent ruling body from the south that it went on to become, but despite this, it doesn't appear as though he ever tried to claim the title of king himself. Intef II began the attack of northern Egypt, and his successor Intef III completed that attack, which then left him to begin the move into Middle Egypt and the attack on Lower Egypt. The first 3 kings of the 11th dynasty, all named Intef, would also become the last 3 kings of the first intermediate period. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Middle Kingdom. With all of the political chaos that was going on and with the competition for power, this resulted in a lot of violence. Prior to the military conflict, it is said that temples were pillaged, artwork was vandalized, and statues of different kings were destroyed. After the reign of the Intefs, they were succeeded by a line of kings who were called Mentuhotep. The second in this line is the ruler who would go on to eventually defeat the kings and rulers of Lower Egypt, those in the Heracleopolitan Kingdom. This is important because it marked a new shift in ancient Egypt. This defeat marked the unification of the country, the continuation of the 11th dynasty, and it brought Egypt into the time of the Middle Kingdom.
At number 5. A mysterious mummy thought to belong to the Princess of Amun-Ra was dug up in a vault in Luxor in the late 1800s, or so the story goes. 4 Englishmen were said to have drawn lots to buy the mummy in the 1890s, with one paying several £1,000s to take the mummy. It seems that this man walked out into the desert later that day and never returned. Another of the men was shot, having to have his arm amputated. Another lost all his money, and another suffered a severe illness. Nonetheless, the coffin eventually reached England, where it caused all kinds of drama. It was eventually gifted to the British Museum, where it was later put up for sale for further chaos. Basically, the British Museum didn't want any of it, it was bringing bad luck to the building. The legend has it that the mummy was sold to a wealthy American and packed into the cargo hold of the RMS Titanic, and, well, you all know what happened there. A lot of people dismiss this as pure myth, as there was no evidence of a mummy in the cargo hold of the ship, but honestly, who knows? Coming into number 4, we have the Cosmic Void. The Heritage Innovation Preservation Project has been working with Cairo University and the Egyptian government to scan the Great Pyramids in Giza. In 2017, a pyramid housing the tomb of the great pharaoh Khufu showed a mysterious and spooky void when it was scanned. Built in 2560 BC, this weird void has been locked away and kept a secret for over 4,000 years. By scanning the pyramid with cosmic rays, the team behind the research estimate that the void is 98 feet long and 50 feet high, which is pretty big. What even is this void? Is it a black hole? is it a curse? It seems to be just kind of nothingness, which in itself is pretty creepy to me. Some archaeologists are calling it an intentional design element, but what is it? It seems this void is completely sealed off from any known passageways inside the pyramid. There's no way to get at it, so how was it even built? So far, the Scan Pyramid team haven't ventured into the void yet, which honestly, I think is for the best. Who knows what kind of plague could be unearthed. Coming into number 3, we have the Catacombs Curse at Tuna El Gebel. Home to the tomb of Osiris and Isidora, the Tuna El Gebel Acropolis was excavated by archaeologist Sami Gabra in the 1940s. Those who worked on the excavations in the area reported spells of dizziness, headaches, shortnesses of breath, and even in some cases seizures. At the time, the team thought that they had angered the ibis-headed god Thoth by disturbing the ancient curse. In reality, it was discovered that the tomb contained a lot of noxious gas, which probably explains the sickness. Either way, some would say they probably should have left the tomb well alone. Coming in at number 2, we have the 2 cursed mummies of Alexandria. In 1699, it was claimed by author Louis Penscher that a Polish man had purchased 2 mummies excavated from tombs in Alexandria. It seems the man wanted to study them for medicinal purposes, which actually was very common back in that era. Often people would resort to robbing graves so they could have bodies to study. Anyway, the mummies were taken on board a ship from Egypt to Poland on a voyage across the Mediterranean Sea. Unfortunately, removing the mummies from their tomb was a terrible idea. The man and his crew started to have violent and horrific nightmares, saying they were haunted by 2 ghosts. They soon realized the ghosts haunting them were the spirits of the mummies. They tossed them overboard, and as soon as the corpses were submerged in the sea, the visions stopped. Okay, finally, this was a mistake. A very, very, very big mistake. On February the 16th, 1923, the last chamber of King Tutankhamun's tomb was opened, and a whole can of cursed worms came out. This is all coming in to number 1. King Tut died when he was just a teenager in around 1400 BC. Fast forward 2,500 years, and archaeologist Howard Carter entered his sealed burial chamber and began the rumors of the Egyptian curse. The tomb was excavated and entered between November 1922 and February 1923. The tomb was, like almost all Egyptian tombs, inscribed with a curse, and this one seemed particularly potent. On the day Carter entered the tomb, a cobra got into his pet canary's cage with the bird dead in its mouth. Now, the cobra is the symbol of the Egyptian monarchy, and the symbolism wasn't lost on locals who began to panic. Lord Carnarvon, the financial backer of the excavation project, died shortly after the tomb was first breached as a result of an infected mosquito bite. The bite possibly matched a healed lesion found on King Tut's cheek during his autopsy. Furthermore, 2 of Carnarvon's half-brothers died shortly after excavation. One of the doctors who worked on King Tut's body, radiologist Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, also died a year later, as did 2 other members of the excavation team, all within a few years of the tomb's opening. So guys, there we have it. That was the top 10 ancient Egyptian tombs that should have stayed closed. What do you think? Do you think it's coincidence, or is there an Egyptian curse afoot? Would you enter a brand new unopened Egyptian tomb? Let me know in the comments section down below. But for now, it's been quite a long video, so I'm just gonna get out of here and leave you to mull this all over. Once again, please do leave us a comment, leave a thumbs up on this video, share it with a friend, and stay subscribed for more most amazing lists. Bye!
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about the top 100 abandoned towns from around the world that were abandoned overnight. See you guys in the next video. What are you waiting for? Click the video now.